Civil rights activists say a former police officer's conviction for murder is just the beginning. The renewed calls for police reform.
San Diego County continues to make headway in the fight against COVID-19, the promising signs and the work that still needs to be done.
Plus, a look at the Positively San Diego actions that have earned some local residents an award for courage.
ABC 10 News at 6 starts now.
With George Floyd and the conviction, that while that's great, we got a lot of work to do.
One day after a former Minnesota police officer was convicted of murdering George Floyd, local civil rights activists are calling for government leaders to act now. Good evening. I'm Kimberly Hunt.
And I'm Steve Atkinson. Our ABC 10 News reporter Rena Nakano explains their demands for police reform.
Unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty.
Former police officer Derek Chauvin guilty on all 3 charges in the death of George Floyd. It was the verdict community advocate Cornelius Bowser was expecting.
I think that he should get the maximum penalty for this.
But he says that verdict is only the first step into police reform, not just in Minnesota, but around the country.
Let's move our region forward toward reimagining policing in San Diego, and toward building the bridge between law enforcement and the community.
Shane Harris of the People's Association of Justice held a joint press conference with community advocates demanding local leaders to pass a resolution of the Congressional George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. This would create an independent process to investigate police misconduct or excessive force, establish a federal registry of police misconduct complaints and disciplinary actions, grant funds to local agencies for anti-discrimination training programs, and prohibit no-knock warrants, chokeholds, carotid holds, among others.
That bill will really bring some radical changes, or at the very least reimagine policing, what it should look like, and set the model and example.
Many procedural changes have already been implemented locally since Floyd's death. In June, every law enforcement agency in the county banned the use of the controversial carotid restraint. And in November, San Diegans voted to have an independent body with subpoena powers to review police conduct. Bowser believes the change needs to begin from within.
We know that it's a culture, it's a belief, it's a practice, an implicit bias that police have about our community that creates that problem.
Rena Nakano, ABC 10 News.
And coming up at 7, we're going to hear from the San Diego Police Officers Association, their reaction to the verdict and the future of police reform. And then later in this newscast, we'll look at the legislation that would establish a new 3-digit number for mental health emergency calls. And right now, people have gathered in North Park in the wake of Derek Chauvin's murder conviction. More than 40 or so people, they're out there right now. Organizers say this rally is meant to celebrate the jury's verdict while also protesting the deadly police shooting in Escondido this morning, as well as one that left a teenager dead in Ohio last night.
Turning to coronavirus in San Diego County, our 14-day rolling average for positive cases has dipped even more, now close to 1.5%. And there were more than 260 new cases reported today. There have been more than 275,000 COVID infections since the pandemic began. After reporting no new deaths for 3 days in a row, today the county says 7 more people have died from the virus. And San Diego County is making promising strides in the fight against COVID. The county is receiving more doses of vaccine, and California's case rate is now the lowest in the entire country. ABC 10 News reporter Jennifer De La Cruz explains where there is still more work to be done.
In a press conference Wednesday, County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher asking San Diegans to remain vigilant.
Now is the time as we're doing our recovery. Kids are going back to school, businesses are reopened. We want to continue to be a leader, to be safe, to be strong.
This week, they received about 300,000 doses. That's up from 200,000 last week. Supervisor Nora Vargas says they're making sure everyone has access to the vaccine.
We continue to place equity at the forefront with continued efforts to increase vaccination rates, especially in hard-to-reach communities.
Earlier this week, the county opened a second monoclonal antibody center to treat COVID-19 patients in Chula Vista. The first at Palomar Medical Center has treated nearly 200 patients so far. While demand for vaccines remains high, Supervisor Fletcher says at some point that will drop off. The county said they're using education and outreach to change the minds of those still skeptical about getting a shot.
They said it was too soon, and that was a concern in December or January. But given where we are now, I think that's probably less of a concern. We'll do aggressive outreach and work and continue to make sure it's available to everyone.
Jennifer Dela Cruz, ABC 10 News.
The county says it's expecting an update on whether or not to restart Johnson & Johnson vaccines by the end of the week.
San Diego's military members are helping to get people vaccinated all across the country. This video right here shows the efforts of Navy Petty Officer 3rd Class Sydney Holder. Now, she's based out of the Naval Hospital at Camp Pendleton and is helping administer vaccines at a community center in St. Louis. In all, nearly 140 local sailors and Marines are supporting the vaccination efforts in St. Louis. San Diego County's move into the orange tier isn't necessarily translating to more people going back into our gyms. It's an issue that we're exploring as part of our Rebound initiative. Catcom owns Studio Sweat in Rancho Bernardo and says that she's doing all she can to get people back into her gym. In the orange tier, gyms are limited to 25% capacity. County data lists potential exposure at gyms in less than 0.5% in COVID cases since last June. That percentage grows to 7% for bars and restaurants, more than 9% for retail.
I don't want to make anyone feel pressure to come back. I just want them to know that it is a good idea for them to come back on so many levels.
A trade group called the California Fitness Alliance is calling for 75% capacity at gyms in the orange tier. We have reached out to the state health department. We're waiting for their response. And you can track the latest restrictions, the reopenings, and find other coronavirus resources with the ABC 10 News app. You can find it for free in the App Store.
Happening now, protesters are gathering outside the Escondido Police Department in response to a deadly police shooting in the city this morning. ABC 10 News reporter Anthony Pura is live with the situation there. Anthony?
Kimberly, there's about 24 people here outside the Escondido Police Department. They were holding speeches earlier. Now they're chanting, directing their chants at the police department here. This has been organized by a group called We the People Escondido. Now, as you mentioned, this is in response to the officer-involved shooting from this morning. We do have some video from this morning of that. Police say they got a report of a man hitting cars with a metal pole near Broadway and 2nd Avenue. An officer was sent out to check it out, and according to Escondido police, the officer made contact with a man who matched that.
We have lost Anthony's audio there. We're going to try to give you an update on that story a little bit later on in this newscast. In the meantime, Chula Vista Police have partnered with the DA, the FBI, and the NCIS to investigate the disappearance of Maya Miliete. The mother of 3 has been missing for more than 3 months now. Her husband was the last person to see her at their home. Her family and the community have been out every weekend since to search for her. Chula Vista Police say that they have interviewed more than 50 people about Miliete's disappearance, and they have received dozens of tips, including from law enforcement in other states.
New details in the Kristen Smart case suggest that she may have been buried under a house at one point before being moved. That's according to investigators in San Luis Obispo County. A classmate of Smart, Paul Flores, was arrested along with his father last week in connection with Smart's killing. Prosecutors say there is biological evidence that makes them believe the victim was buried underneath the father, Ruben Flores' deck at one time. Smart was a freshman at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. She was last seen in May of 1996 leaving a party with Flores. Her body has never been found.
San Diego police used a K9 to take down the driver of a truck that had been reported stolen today. Police first spotted that truck near Moreno Boulevard and pursued it into Mission Valley. The driver eventually stopped and got out, but wouldn't comply with police commands. That's when they sent in the K9, who brought the man down. He was taken into custody. And a controversial license plate reader program will continue in Chula Vista. Critics have pushed back against that program after information surfaced that it was sharing data with federal immigration agencies through a third-party systems of providers. The Chula Vista Police Department says it was unaware of the practice and then stopped sharing the data immediately. The chief of police says that she requested the state to come in and audit the program. There has been no word yet on whether the state will conduct it.
The Museum of Us reopened its doors for guests today after months of being closed. In the orange tier, capacity is limited to 50%. COVID safety requirements are in place. Visitors to the museum today are happy to see it open again.
I think it's super exciting. I think being able to come see stuff like this, I think like Balboa Park itself is such a big part of the community in San Diego, so I think it's definitely exciting for people that are traveling or even just like, local San Diegans to come back and be able to enjoy the different perks of their community again.
This year, the museum is changing its membership program to welcome more people to its exhibits. The $19.95 ticket will now include admission for an entire year.